Wonderful to see all of you here. I think, Cristina, you bring us good weather, because I remember the first day, it was wonderful weather, and today it is also excellent weather. As we come close, very sadly, I think, to the end of this lecture series, I actually want to begin by thanking all of you. It has been really amazing. I think that you guys have all felt the amazing atmosphere of discussion and ideas that has filled the room for the last month. Very few times have I seen audiences in Cambridge and elsewhere so engaged and so enthusiastic as all of you. Many of you have given Cristina ideas that I know that she will take and continue working with. Some of you have even given her recommendations for pools, I believe, for her to carry out her swimming. Some of you have even gifted her, very meaningfully, drawings of her sister, Liliana. And for me, it has been a truly beautiful experience to watch this dialogue, and I want to begin by thanking you sincerely for such a wonderful experience. As I think back to these lectures, I keep coming back to something that Cristina mentioned in her first talk. 4 weeks ago, right here, she encouraged us to go beyond the traditional motto of MFA programs, which you guys probably know. It's write what you know. Instead, subtly changing the wording, she encouraged us to write to know, meaning write in order to know. And I keep thinking about the powerful intuitions that lie behind this simple expression, write to know. I love the idea that knowledge is not something one has mastery over, something disembodied and abstract that indirectly pre-exists art, something that pre-exists our cultural acts, but rather, as she seems to be suggesting, something that one discovers via writing, via art, via culture. Perhaps knowing Cristina's love for swimming, perhaps knowing her guilty predilection for quoting Argentine writers, Ricardo Piglia, another Argentine, once wrote, "Literature has a lot to do with swimming. An artist never knows if they will be able to swim. They have been able to do so before, but they don't know if they will be able to do so the next time they enter language." Right to know is a poignant way of saying, write like you would throw yourself to the ocean, knowing that it will be the contact with that other water called language that will keep you afloat in your search for truth. Write trusting that it will be the contact with a world that both on the one hand touches us and simultaneously resists us, what will keep us alive. I think that in exemplary way, each one of Cristina's lectures has been a wonderful exploration of this notion of writing as embodied search for knowledge. Each one has explored in different ways the idea that writing is always delving into another space beyond our mastery, a space that both touches us and resists us, a space of contact, but also of vulnerability. You guys might remember that the first lecture invited us to go behind the scenes in the touching process of writing Liliana's Invincible Summer, the powerful account of her sister's Femicide. We accompanied her while she lost her breath and while she regained it, forcing us to ask, what does it mean to write and breathe alongside those we love, and how to share the breath of life with those we grieve? In the second lecture, Cristina drove us further in time, actually to her first novel, Nadie me verá llorar, No One Will See Me Cry, and asked, what does it mean to push our bodies to inhabit the traces of others? Transcribing, in this case, the words of Modesta Burgos became a way for her of thinking about the complex ethics of writing as well as its politics. Lastly, just last week, we saw her speak beautifully about the possibility of grieving in a second language, a powerful plea for vulnerability that got us to think beyond the sense of mastery that usually we get in relationship to our native tongue. In each case, it seemed to me that it was the entanglement between writing and life that came forth. No matter how often death was spoken about, it always felt as an opening to something else, buried below the landscape of violent, modern patriarchal society, namely the possibility of a life worth living. And that, I think we can all agree, is a powerful political project that redefines what we mean when we say we're human. I am sure that when Hans, Chris, and all of the members of the Global Humanities Initiative started thinking about this lecture series, this was in many ways what they had in mind. I began by thanking all of you, and I think that I speak on behalf of you all that when we say that we are very sad to see Cristina leave. But don't dismay, of course, thanks to the work of the wonderful Greta, Nick, and Mark, this has all been recorded, as I promised, and a little bit like in the novel of Bioy Casares, La Invención de Morel, we will be able to hone on to the memory of this lecture series via YouTube. I actually have been told by Greta, in fact, that the first 3 of the YouTube series has been already uploaded. So in a way, Cristina remains with us, if she gives us permission. Nonetheless, I want to take this opportunity to, of course, thank you, Cristina, for this amazing series of lectures, which I know have inspired so many of us and have reawakened a belief in the real political as well as creative power of research. And I think Cristina said it beautifully in that first lecture when she said that all writing is research. So thanks a lot, Cristina. And I want to finish by saying that despite my somber tone, besides the fact that, of course, we are sad for this to be the last lecture, we still get this last lecture, right? The time has not yet arrived to say goodbye. And I know that this lecture promises to be as touching and as evocative as all of the other ones that came before. And I believe that Cristina also has a surprise for you. So welcome, Cristina, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Carlos. I love that quote by Piglia. You always find the best quotes by Piglia. Thank you so much. Yeah, no, it's absolutely fantastic. ¿Cómo están todos? Buenas tardes. Bien. Okay, glad to hear that. Well, as Carlos said, this is the 4th of 4 lectures. And before we get into that, I want to just speak very briefly about 3 issues. First, I want to thank all of you for the generous welcoming and for making just a wonderful experience out of this stay. It's been intense, it's been enriching, and I've had a lot of fun too. So thank you for contributing to that. Well, and thanks to everybody who's been making this possible, obviously, and the organizers, and then the photographers, and Greta, and everybody. I'm absolutely thankful for all your work. Now, secondly, some of you may know that I had originally planned to conclude this cycle with a different lecture. It was a lecture organically linked to Autobiography of Cotton, whose translation into English dropped on May the 5th in the UK, by the way. It was a lecture about the mass graves for the poor in northern Mexico. It's a lecture that helped me pose the question about what it is like to be a descendant of people who have been buried in mass graves. I thought the work of Dana Kabelina, an Ukrainian artist, helped me to think through this question. what was interesting for me about her work is that she created a link between mass graves and the concept of the general strike. The lecture does exist, and if some of you should be interested in reading it, I'll be more than glad to share that lecture with all of you. Just contact me, and I'll make sure that you get it. But I decided to conclude this cycle with a different lecture, and I'm going to try to explain you why. Okay. This is a piece that was commissioned by the Humboldt Forum in Berlin in 2024. We staged it at the Humboldt Forum in the summer of 2025. And in the winter of 2025, we did the same in the grounds of the Colegio Nacional in downtown Mexico City, an institution that I was appointed to in 2023. Some of the pictures that you are going to be watching today belong to the first stage, which took place in Berlin, but most of the material actually comes directly from downtown Mexico City, from El Colegio Nacional. Now, why did I think that this was a better way of concluding our conversation? The first reason is something that I already mentioned last week. I've been sensing all of you, and I've been paying attention to our conversation, and I think as rigorous and studious as all of you are, I get the sense that all of you are prone to think outside of the box. And I like that, by the way. I've been an academic most of my life. I've written the papers. I've submitted them to the adequate journals. They got published. I got tenure. I mean, that's the whole story. But I've been an academic long enough to see how we transform ourselves too, how the academic conversation has become little by little more open about different ways of sharing our findings. We become, as a body, I think, more concerned about reaching different, wider audiences. And in order to do so, we found ways to work together, to collaborate with different disciplines. And I think one of the most enriching ones for me, it's been the work with visual artists, specifically with performance. So this is something that I'm going to be talking about in the lecture, and I will be inviting you to participating a little bit later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. On the other hand, and this is my third point, I thought that a cycle called Tactile, that it would be much better to conclude a cycle called Tactile with some kind of touch, right? Something that might be a little bit messy. I hope you are not wearing your best clothes today. It's going to be messy, muddy, and something, an action, an intervention that might help us remind ourselves about the range of activities that we, in fact, do together, the entanglements, the co-participation, the contribution, the collaboration that makes us a community. In this case, a university community, but a community at large, too. A community that involves, of course, the living, but also the death. So that's what I'm going to be talking about now, all right? Mud. It's difficult to write in loose soil. The story knife digs into the ground, leaving a mark that for just a few moments evokes a shape. Soon, however, that shape, which is just a hole, falls apart under the pressure of the crumbling dirt. the hole fills in, the shape that was a letter disappears. To write in the dirt is to erase. For the letters to remain and form words, stringing phrases together or completing full sentences, you must add water and make mud. The marshes, swamps, and bogs where mud is found have historically been decried as empty wilderness, untouched wasteland, or as a danger to your health. It was in the separation of mud into its basic components, water and dirt, that the earliest states emerged. In the beginning, they had to dry marshes and swamps and bogs to create orderly farmlands for agriculture and the flat areas that led to the formation of settled villages. Mud, where letters can germinate, and with those letters, the memory we cling to, was declared an enemy of the state. There, in mud, we have written, and there, in the mud, we shall write again. Story knife. Walking through the Humboldt Forum collection warehouse can make you dizzy. I don't know, how many of you have been there? To this, you have, so you know what I'm talking about. All right. The objects that dwell on dust-covered shelves or impact display cabinets examine us with ecstatic, wondrous eyes, their stunned eyes, their perpetually alert eyes, as we walk before them in a state of contrition. Some objects send a shiver through the body, like the gigantic buffalo skins. What is that? These ones and these one. Where tiny figures depict long, convoluted, bloody stories of genocide in the Western United States. Others cause a sudden blush, a hint of some demure tenderness. The clay figurines that, in contrived positions, frozen in complicated angles for eternity, bring news about sex as it was practiced by our ancestors worldwide. The brightly colored cachinas with erect antennae like feathers beg the question of time. Do these sacred beings for the Hopi community come to us from the remote past, or do they draw closer from a future we may never know? Little by little, we turn away from the large objects that looting and pillage have brought to this chamber of colonial wonders, and almost naturally, perhaps against the grain, we gravitate towards the smallest of things, the minuscule objects of daily life, left smooth to the touch by myriads of hands that have wielded them in rage or grasped them in awe, cuddled them in utter kindheartedness, and held them against all odds. Are we attracted to these items that belong to the private realm because they help us circumvent the questions of power and governance, exploitation and sovereignty? Or are we casting our hands towards them precisely because they propel those same questions, but from the juncture of flesh and body, skin and touch? A hand is a key. Often, a touch suffices to unlock stories that have been concealed or merely dormant right on the surface of things. To allow touch, objects demand certain motions, angles only familiar to those in the know. The millimetric decisions of bone and cartilage, of muscle, attempted again and again in belabored choreographies that involve skill, friction, complicity, the elaborate give and take of daily routine. It is a ceremony, a constellation of gestures with history lodged in between. The hand of the present travels blindly, approaching and meddling with rituals others long ago may have simply known as work, craft, amusement, life. For touch to take place, for touch to flourish, the hand must yield to the object, abiding by its flows and cues, its history. Bodies have no alternative. They follow the quiet instructions embedded in matter and replicate motions, however uncomfortable or unfamiliar, to shake hands with the past. No touch is innocent. Tact begets tact, a reverberation that unfastens the arms of the present, making space in the here and now for forcibly silenced energies and outcomes envisioned by others. Such is tactility's power. Less a nostalgic encounter with things past, and more a hold, able to awaken intricately woven webs of struggle and awe, solidarity, and imagination. Story knives are both tools and works of art. When they land on the palm of our hands, diminutive and sharp, their edges engraved with symmetrical line patterns in black, they bring the voices of girls together in tow, excited as they mark the snow with sketches that reveal cautionary tales. Their bodies, squatting before the ground, gradually come into being, as do the arms, elongated, and the hands dexterously holding the story knife and plunging it into the dirt. Do you hear the giddiness that comes from afar and glows over an atmosphere up until now dull and sober? The Yupik girls from Southwest Alaska take shape before our eyes, tipping over objects as they run in the halls, spontaneous and spirited, playing hide and seek through the labyrinths of time. These are their smiles, resonant and definitive, their voices mellow to our ears, the resolved stride. The excitement that storytelling provokes engulfs the warehouse. Waves of words crash against the glass cabinets and enliven our skins. We're not in Berlin, but far away in the Arctic, under an overcast sky brimming with portents. We're girls telling someone else's stories and simultaneously inscribing our own, ourselves, on the surface of the earth forever. Yaruin, they whisper, signaling the knife they hold. Their voices, now succumbing under the weight of distance, slowly fade, their amber color barely glowing through the dust. An echo insists. Bone, wood, marble, caribou antlers. Another echo digresses. Stainless steel, aluminum. They all laugh, as if responding to a conceited joke, look at each other, and soon enough glance at us sideways. Then, honoring a blueprint they know by heart, they wipe out the story with the flat of the blade forever. So our elders teach us. This is what the Yupik girls do. They ride out in the open, turning the landscape into pages of a book made from matter and memory. They gather outside their homes at preconceived hours, and together, striding in unison through the village, they don't pause until finding the propitious riverbank, that patch of snow that will welcome and hold their story knifing. There, in the outskirts of town, they crouch and kneel, prostrating themselves before the wet earth, legs bending with ease. They grease the power of their attention, eyes alert, ears expectant, hands ready to work alongside the tongue. Breathe in, breathe out. We're almost set. Wielding the story knife gifted by family members, a generous grandmother, an uncle concerned with the dwindling of tradition, a sister just too old to go on playing children's games, they begin. A girl begins. These are pictures from the performance in downtown Mexico City. Stories may vary. Two Vicaran boys unleash a legendary massacre. A girl that strays too far from home ends up devoured by a storm. A group of rowdy girls attract the fury of Raven, the trickster god. Lessons are clear. Don't fight. Pay heed to your elders. Behave. But all the stories invariably start with the drawing of home, and within this home, the graceful tracing of furnishings, domestic or work utensils, and the rectangular shapes of windows and doors. Tiny figurines emerging from the mud or snow propel the tale, articulating words signaled by lines marked on the ground and uttered simultaneously by the story-knifing girl. The holy alliance of discourse and speech conjure a writing that goes through the body and the territory alike, working together for the sake of tradition. There is no turning of pages in this book of matter and memory. There is no going back in the game of girls, apparently childish. As the stories unfold, and when they overlap, and the stories always overlap, the story knifing requires erasure. For the storytelling to continue, girls must wipe out the initial dance on the ground and replace them with others. They have to make room for a new scene. They have to destroy to make anew. They must start from zero. But do we ever start from zero? Is the obliterated mark, blanketed by mud or snow, ever truly lost? The Mexican writer José Revueltas argued that territory is never a tabula rasa. Radically shared from its very origins, territory holds its life forms in layers of memory that are also layers of time. Territory stores, archives, preserves. The mark, varied, becomes geologic in time. The mark, repeated over and over again, becomes bodily movement, tender muscle, or pain in the neck, or sheer suppleness. Tradition embodied. The memory of the territory and the memory of the body pulled at one another from childhood through death. Still, stories end, even stories carved in the mud during animated story knifing sessions that routinely involved wiping out. The phrase the girls utter to close a tale, so our elders teach us, works as a signature or a buckle, well fastened, signaling a closure, but also as a link that spans an established tradition. Could it be also a portal? As the Yupik girls leave their homes, stepping on the liminal regions of misty riverbanks and open snowfields, do they ever dream of tales that speak of other, different worlds? Is there a space here in all these cautionary tales full of warnings and advice, even admonishments, for other wayward stories. Are all these girls invariably so well behaved? I don't think so. A girl ends. The writing that travels through the body and lands on the territory may have been ephemeral, subjects to continuous erasure, yet repetition, which is also a form of collaboration and complicity, made it consequential. And we all, when writing, crouched by the riverbanks of memory, diligently tracing letters in the hopes that others would retrace them, bring them back into being, awakening them. And we, the wayward descendants of those Yupi girls who wielded their story knives again and again, striving to activate stories once buried but never dead. Is in all writing traced in the snow of time, betting against oblivion, against silence, and in favor of communal memory, always on the verge of defeat? Is it not everything we write subject to the same continuous threat of banishment, erasure, disappearance? Femicide. In January 2025, Javier Milei, president of Argentina, another Argentinian, terrible, took advantage of his participation in the World Economic Forum in Davos to announce that his government would seek to remove femicide from his country's penal code, classified for the first time in 2012. In Mexico and other Latin American countries, a vibrant feminist movement has successfully identified in detail and named with precision the most lethal form of violence against women, femicide, defining it as the killing of women for being women, a murder with a gender-based motivation. Placing the concept of femicide at the center of the public discourse, and especially into the penal code of 30 countries on the planet, 19 of them in Latin America, by the way, and only 8 in Europe. I don't think England is one of them. Yeah. Has effectively called into question the long-standing patriarchal narrative that, through the cultural and legal figures of the crime of passion, has historically blamed the victims and exonerated the perpetrators. It is not coincidence that the far right, now endeavoring to turn feminism into one of the great boogeymen of our time, has increasingly rallied against, decried, and bluntly attempted to erase any victory for gender equality. The overturning of Roe versus Wade on 24 June 2022 meant a setback of women's rights in the United States and constitutes, too, a reminder that erasure is not just an ominous threat, but a blatant reality. The message, women's rights are never safe. The words of the law, like the Yupik girls' cautionary stories, can be obliterated with the flat of the blade of power. Perhaps, just like those Yupik girls from southwestern Alaska, we shall trace these words again and again in mud or snow or paper or screen, so the memory prevails and a future of equality and all remains open for all. We must insist. The official rates of femicides around the world are chilling. While every day 10 women are victims of lethal gender violence in countries like Mexico and Honduras, 3 women are murdered by their intimate partners in the United States. As the thinker and activist Rita Segato argues, we're witness to an all-out war against women on a global scale that begins with the exploitation of domestic labor, subsists through the extreme inequities of work and education, and takes its most sinister shape in the multiple forms of violence that with dangerous frequency gets confused with and normalize through the language of romantic love. Contemporary societies have developed an extreme tolerance when it comes to women's suffering. Producing language clear and compassionate enough to tell the stories of violence from the point of view of women and their affective communities has not been easy. In Mexico, it took the professor and researcher of the Instituto Politécnico Nacional, Marta Tronco, years to complete surveys and various analyses to generate the violentómetro in 2019, an educational tool that allows the public to identify and thus prevent gender violence, which frequently goes unnoticed, especially in its early phases. Using a vertical ruler with changing colors that indicate the increasing levels of danger, the violentómetro begins by drawing attention to verbal violence, control, public humiliation, and physical abuse, and moves up to rape and femicide. The nurse Jacqueline Campbell, whose work in U.S. hospitals, along with information from shelters for battered women and data from those charged with enforcing the law, did something similar. In 1986, she created a protocol called the Danger Assessment that facilitates the identification and prevention of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. The terms coined in these and other warning devices have allowed a growing number of women to recognize and quickly react to aggression. Those same terms have opened the doors to stories of gender violence told beyond the limits of or against prevailing patriarchal narratives. The danger, nevertheless, persists. The danger of femicide and the danger of erasing the laws and narratives that protect women from femicide. Could we sit together near the ground and wield our version of the story knives to trace the stories that escape that patriarchal joke? Will it be possible to chain together our efforts from all the corners of the planet to inscribe the names of women lost to gender violence on paper or the screen or in trays of mud? This is the Title 19, Chapter 5 of the Mexican Penal Code, which in June 14, 2012, finally included femicide, the crime of femicide. And we can see here how it may disappear just as well if we don't defend it, obviously. A name is a story, a history. For those who know it by heart, who savor it with pleasure or melancholy on their tongues and under the palate, a proper name holds the password that opens the door to another world. To utter a name is to retrieve the original code to a full life. Tracing Liliana's name in the earth that shelters her grave has been more than a mere gesture, an inauguration. Liliana Rivera Garza is the name, as you know, of my younger sister, whose femicide occurred on July 16, 1990, when she was 20 years old, and whose story lies at the heart of Liliana's Invincible Summer, published some 30 years after the crime occurred. An architecture student at the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana in Mexico City, Liliana was a smart girl, quick with satire, a fervent defender of her autonomy and her free way of loving. I remember Gabriela Wiener said that perhaps a more appropriate adjective, a more contemporary one, would be polyamorosa. I don't know. Sounded good to me. Even though the city's government expected an arrest warrant for Angel Gonzalez Ramos, my sister's then ex-boyfriend, he fled and still remains beyond the reach of the law. As in more than 95% of femicide cases in Mexico, justice has not been served. We visited Jardines del Descanso, the cemetery where my sister is buried, one bright midday in early March. Whispering, we drove at snail pace down the avenue of the Pacific Highway, a road lined with all weeping willow trees that leads to the Nevado de Toluca, a dormant volcano and sacred mountain for indigenous communities in the highlands of central Mexico. We carried flowers and a wooden story knife with us, but never considered the lack of water. The winter months in the highlands are famously dry, with blue skies as terrifyingly limpid as clean slates. Not a cloud in sight. All these gusts of wind, so crisp. Beneath us, the patches of yellow grass gave off a sense of time, suddenly still. We paced up and down rolling hills, often stepping on other people's tombstones, before finding my sister's grave. We stood there at its feet in a silence that felt sacred. Then we were awakened. Water, we said. We need water. The cemetery lay deserted at that time of the day. We turned around only to gaze upon wreaths of wilted flowers, squeaky pinwheels obeying the commands of the air, and stray dogs. Had we died without even noticing it? The couple of gray-haired women appeared out of the blue as if a mirage. We asked for the worn-down plastic bucket they were using to water a grave, and they gently nodded in agreement, hardly looking at us. Were they angels or ghosts or just ourselves far in the future? We couldn't decide. It took us a while to find a basin thick with murky old water covered with a thin film of green algae. It took some time, some effort to carry the bucket uphill once and again. For years, we've done this. Pour water over the granite tombstone that features her name, water the rectangle of grass that shields her coffin, and fill the hole where we leave flowers. This time, after ripping out crabgrass by its roots, we ran our hands over the tomb repeatedly in our attempt to leave it smooth and flat, like a chalkboard or a mud mirror. Squatting, leaning on the land, I made the first incisions in the earth, while Amaranta Caballero Prado, a poet and visual artist who is also a longtime friend, filmed the zine. The story knife quickly ran into gravel and the stubborn weed roots. I had to insist. I had to enlarge the hole so that it would slowly take on the letter's shape. Dragging the story knife along the ground surface, I attempted to leave a mark, and when I failed, when the dirt kept crumbling, I gripped it tighter, as if it were a hammer or a scalpel, to no avail. The parched earth split open, lumps of dirt immediately filling up any letter hole. You know how difficult it is, right? I'm trying to write her name, and her name is constantly escaping me right there. It is so difficult to write in loose soil. It is difficult to write. More water, we said after a while. More water is needed. We repeated, refusing to admit defeat. Our hair hung disheveled and frazzled, flushed with effort, our faces bitter, our clenched, gasping mouths. The water gave off a putrid smell that clawed to our skins, but we persevered. Then we paused in silence, perplexed, as the sun at its zenith mercilessly spied on us, everlasting statues. Is there a word for this sudden immobility that reaches the confines of the soul and enlivens it? Then we awoke. Pacing the cemetery paths aimlessly, we tipped over the small rusty tin can that, unbeknownst to us, would save the day. Would this be enough to wet the earth? We wonder. Full of resolve, we drew water from the bucket and carefully spilled it over the grave's dirt. The hands of our childhood kneaded the elements in bliss, with haste born out of sheer physical joy, until they yielded the flat, velvety mud we were after. A chalkboard, a mirror, a frame. Your name will stay here, Liliana. Who said this? To whom belong the words, as will your date of birth and the date of your death? Were we uttering or just overhearing these phrases? Your name will remain here, and later, here it will fade to give way to another name, another key to unlock yet another world. Resting next to each other, we shared anecdotes. The time she sat at the kiosk with a flower in her hand, counting each of its petals. When she hit her head after diving into the shallow side of the pool. The way she shook both the pot and her hips when making popcorn, while the mud opened up majestically and then closed itself in, holding every sign within. The earth preserves, archives, immortalizes. The earth is love. A blade becomes a leaf. Does the earth feel pain? When, in sketching a cautionary tale, a Yupik girl slits open the snow or the mud with a story knife, does the earth resent it, slightly moaning in anguish or howling even at the lowest of frequencies? We wonder about this. As Saúl Hernández Vargas, a visual artist and jewelry maker, envisioned a contemporary rendition of the Arctic story knife, the blade became a gravitational issue. We talked endlessly at times about its history and uses, about its various meanings, about the nature of the girls who brandished them, down with dexterous delight. But we hover back once and again to the issue of the blade, the dagger. Did we need a sharp blade to inscribe in the mud the names of the women to whom the force of femicide had already fatally hurt? Would we then, regardless of our good intentions, reproduce the wound and amplify brutality, becoming their unsuspected puppets? We question the pertinence of the sharp edge customarily employed to rip open and inflict pain in tracing the names of those we love in earthly materials we profoundly care for, too. There must be a way to honor these women, we muttered, invoking them and making them eternal without the slightest hint of further damage. Saul hunted for regular kitchen knives in thrift stores close to our Houston home for weeks on end. Stainless steel, silver-plated, titanium, ceramic, plastic. He hoarded them all, placing them in size order on his studio table afterward. It was an experiment rather than a plan. Is it possible to de-blade a knife? He attempted to reimagine the bladeless knives that travel restrictions allow in airplanes, and the dull knives unable to cut after years of inordinate use in crowded kitchens worldwide. He failed, and then he failed again, only better and with more resolve this time, and you know who said that, obviously. Lady Gaga called them blades of grass in a song. But Walt Whitman, in a self-made book from the mid-19th century, described them as leaves of grass. The grammatical difference might have gone unnoticed among native English speakers, but became momentous for a migrant artist keen on deblading a knife. It was not a matter of sharpness, but of species. Saul moved effortlessly then from the world of second-hand sharp objects to the supple realm of green flora. Employing brass and copper, he designed two-story leaves and a story twig, whose soft, curving silhouettes approached the mud in utter tenderness, drawing the name of Liliana as if a caress on the epidermis of the earth. And now you know why I asked you to bring some twigs to today's lecture. Slowly, the mud unfastened its grip, and slowly it brought the name up to the surface in hollow traces that we dutifully wiped out with the palms of our hands. Effective as writing instruments, the story leaves and the story twig lay with unambiguous grace, motionless on the mud. Would the Yupik girls approve? Would they embrace these transubstantiated knives and use them to sketch stories of woe and courage? An adage in Mexico claims that you shall never hit a woman, not even with the petal of a rose. Nunca golpear a una mujer ni con el pétalo de una rosa. As soft and delicate as a petal is, it could nonetheless turn into a means of cruelty, if brandished in anger or intended for humiliation. So our elders teach us. Leaves and twigs could certainly follow suit. But in presenting these story leaves and the story twig, we would like to bet on the side of gentleness, hardiness, and correlation. A leaf might as well bring up the leafness in us, a twig, our twigness. Always attached to a stem, leaves are the main organs of photosynthesis and transpiration, the true lungs of our world, while twigs, slender and woody growths, remain pliable and tender to touch. Let us draw the names of our dead with the hardy relationality of the vegetable world. These are pictures taken in Mexico City at the Colegio Nacional. Marisol Cid, a professional photographer, is responsible for these images. And I just love the attention, the emphasis she placed on the hands themselves. You could see age, you could see class, you could, there are whole stories there embedded in those pictures. A girl's game. We aren't, you pick girls, obviously, walking in a pack on the snow, holding a blade in our pockets as we approach the riverbank on the outskirts of our village on an overcast day in March. We laugh, but not with that crystalline cadence, the clatter of loose footsteps brimming with freedom and coming together and splashing mud in unison. We don't speak their language. Well, I don't. We don't say Yaruin, savoring each syllable, when we grip the story knife in the open and bring it to meet the wet earth with ease and purpose combined. First tracing the outlines of a house and then inside it sketching the short, straight lines that represent men and women and the crosses that indicate whether they are sleeping or have died. But we sit around the lump of mud that we've managed to shape here at the foot of an extinct volcano with the help of rotten water and the dry dirt of the cemetery, and chat nonstop as if we hadn't left our childhood and puberty behind, our hands soiled with the grime of the earth, our faces splattered with mud while the early afternoon sun beats us down. A rakios, electrifying energy travels at top speed from the coast of southwestern Alaska to the highlands in central Mexico. This is the will to tell, finally, the will to bring out in the open what has been forcibly silenced, whether by the state or by tradition, founding the open itself in the process. This is the glow that drapes us when grief becomes language, when words, once obliterated or non-existent, peek at the world with their piercing eyes. This is a determination to seek justice, not only the justice that legal institutions have so often denied, so many of us, but this other justice that is broader, more lasting, perhaps even cosmic in nature. It is the justice that burgeons hand in hand with the truth, silhouetting the contours of our collective memory, often described appropriately as restorative. It is the justice we all serve when agreeing to utter a name and invoke at the same time an entire life with its density and richness, surprise, its contradictions, its complexity, even its future. This is the justice that announces to the rest of us that this place, where our loved ones should be, is not an empty place. Here lives our yearning, our capacity for care, our stubborn insistence on immortality. Our loved ones will remain here while our grief persists. Perhaps you are not a Yupik girl, nor do you stride along a riverbank with a story knife close at hand. Or do you? We have brought to this place in Cambridge a few trays filled with velvety mud, some sort of mud. It felt very soft to the touch. The result of water and dirt meeting once more. May you inscribe the names of the women or girls you loved and lost, using our story leaves, the twigs that you brought today. May we invoke their names in this ritual that gathers us across the porous membranes of life and death. May we make space for them to arrive, to settle, to remain in the places where they belong. They are still here, as we all well know, and we are still, and we will still be here, playing with them at being immortal. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Before, just 1 second, before we open up the Q&A session, I just want to thank Carlos today, because when I changed plans, instead of freaking out, Carlos said, "It will work out. We will make it work." And so he's been, getting the trays and buying. When you bought some sand, finally he got some mud, some soil, loose soil, from his own house, from his own home. And the trays that we're using belong in Trinity's dining hall. So we are working. We asked for permission. It is legal. It is legal. Yeah. And so we will be working with materials that belong organically to Cambridge, to this site. Thank you so much for going along with this plan, Carlos. All right.